So guys, when you look at determinants of investment, the first determinant of investment is what we call interest rates. And within interest rate, I'm going to discuss something called the marginal efficiency of capital theory. Okay, you need to remember this term, marginal efficiency of capital, or MEC theory. Okay, the MEC theory basically says this, that interest rates are kind of like the price of investment. Why do we call it a price of investment? Because like there's always an opportunity cost. If I buy a machinery, I could use the same money to put in a bank and I can get interest rate out of it. Similarly, if I decide to borrow money, right, from somewhere, my return on that machinery should be on annual greater than the interest rate. Because if it's greater than, let's say if I borrow $100 and buy, let's say, a machine, and let's say interest rate it's at 10%, I should expect that the investment should give me more than 10% return, or at least more than $10 return. Because what will happen is that whatever $100 that I've borrowed, I will then repay my interest and pocket some of the money. Okay, does that make sense? So in other words, this is called the marginal efficiency of capital theory, and I'm going to explain that through a table where we will say, let's say, as a firm, we have projects. Okay, I have projects 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and then on each project, I have a initial investment. Okay, and let's say the investment is $100 each on the 4 projects. Okay, then we have what we call next up is what we have is a return. Okay, so each project has a return, and let's say the first project is giving you a return of 120. The second project, let me just be consistent with my tail. Yeah, 120, and then 115, right? 110 and 105. You all with me? Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Then comes your rate of return. Rate of return basically means, another name for rate of return is also marginal efficiency of capital. What's your return on that capital? The first project gives you, let's say, 20% return. How'd you get that? 120 minus 100 is 20. The second project is giving you 15%, and then 10%, and then 5%. Okay. If your interest rate, R for interest rate, okay, if your interest rate is, for example, 25%, will you invest in any of the projects? And the answer is no, because the rate of return is too low. Rate of return is too low. What if the interest rate goes to, for example, guys, what if the interest rate goes to, let's say, 20%? Now, will you invest in any of the projects? You will say you will invest in the first project. Remember, there is a theory that we did, which is that when you look at this rate of return, that means this is basically, if the interest rate is 20% and the rate of return is 20%, somebody would say, well, why do you want to invest? Because your rate of return in this case is rate of return minus interest rate, you're making zero profit. Isn't that true? Because rate of return minus interest rate would be what you're pocketing. But remember, this is what we call zero in economics means normal profit. Remember, when I say profit, zero profit would mean normal profit. And is normal profit acceptable? Yes, because it takes into account all your profits, even all your opportunity costs. So if interest rate is 20%, I'm going to invest in one project. What if the interest rate goes to, for example, 10%? How many projects will you invest in? The answer is first, second, and third. And the interest rate goes to, for example, 5%. All 4 projects will become financially viable. Isn't that true? Therefore, can I say this? When the interest rate was 20%, your investment was 100. When the interest rate went all the way to 5%, if the cost of borrowing goes down, you will be investing in also those projects which were otherwise you will never invest in. If government of Pakistan currently, or the state bank, lowers the interest rate to let's say 2%, then a lot more people will be investing in things which otherwise were not lucrative, because then suddenly you'll be like, you know what, it's really cheap to borrow. I can just, for example, buy, put my money in, for example, a business, and the return could be acceptable to you. But if the interest rates are really high, then you'll be like, you know what, the business should give me at least this much return for me to make it worthwhile for me to invest in that. Got it? Does that make sense? So, in other words, lower the interest rates, we say this, when the interest rates fall, the opportunity cost falls, or in other words, it becomes cheaper to invest, and that means investment will go up. Okay, so in other words, what is the opportunity cost? Because like interest rate falls, the opportunity cost of investing in this business, for example, if the interest rate was 20%, was 20%. Because if you do not put the money $100 in this business, you could have just keep it in the bank. The opportunity cost is like not invest, just keep it in the bank, and you get, for example, $20, which means 20%. Make sense? So in other words, guys, if I see this in terms of a diagram, this is how the diagram would look like for investment. We say on the x-axis, you have planned investment. The firms are planning their investment. And on the y-axis, we have the price of a loan, which is your interest rates. We say interest rate is your price of the lending that we're doing, the borrowing that we're doing, and there we say this, the demand curve for interest rate is downward sloping, which basically means lower the interest rates, the cheaper it becomes to borrow, and therefore the higher will be your investment. Okay, so this is the first factor. Keynesians believe, not Keynesians, but basically economists believe that interest rate will play a crucial role, because lower interest rate will mean higher investment in an economy. Questions, guys? Anyone? Any questions? Anyone? Yeah, does that make sense, everyone? So first factor is interest rates, and interest rates is basically a movement along the curve, right? So interest rate is a movement along the curve, because the price is interest rate, and then this is planned investment, is the amount of investment that happens. Do we need to? Yeah, it's planned investment. Are we good? Any questions? Okay, moving on, guys. Let's talk about other factors which can. So while interest rate is the movement along the curve, now let's talk about factors which can cause a shift of the curve. So shift of the investment curve. So the first one is basically your interest rate. The second one is, guys, what will happen if, for example, cost of capital goods fall? Okay, so if I go back to my table, can I have 1 minute of attention from everyone? If I go back to my table, guys, look at this. If right now investment is $100, okay, what if this investment requirement is not $100 anymore? Okay, but what if this investment requirement is only $90? Okay, what if this is 90? What will happen then? Your rate of return will become 30. 30 divided by 90 is how much? If you do the math, it's 1/3 or 33%. You guys get that? So in other words, can I say this? When the cost of capital goods go down, the rate of return will go up. for all level of interest rates, you will see, I'm not going to do the math for everyone, but everything, but basically 115 minus 19 over 90 will be higher return and so on and so forth. So in other words, guys, what I'm trying to say is this, that higher, lower the cost of capital goods, um, basically higher will be the rate of return, and therefore, in other words, what will happen therefore? Firms will firms will invest more at all levels of interest rates. So at all level of interest rates, basically you will see firms to invest more. In other words, something like this will happen. Your if this is your interest rate, you will see investment level to go up. Okay, why? Because suddenly an independent factor, not the price, but an independent factor like cost of capital goods is going down. Got it? So you will see the demand for investment will go up. Why? Because it's becoming cheaper to invest, which means your rate of return is going up. Do we have a question? No, are you getting it? Yeah. So lower, cheaper cost of capital goods basically means demand curve for investment will go to the right. Is that fine? Does that make sense? Any questions about this one? So this first one was a movement along the curve. The second one is a shift of the curve. Make sense, guys? What can, other than cost of capital goods, what other factor can make a shift to happen? I'm saying, other than, like cost of capital goods, if I go to the table, what else can make the shift to happen from this table only? Investment is one thing, return on investment. Suddenly, what if my laptop becomes better when it comes to the productivity of it? What if when you give 100 to a laptop, the processing power is strong and your 120 is not 120, but like, let's say 140 or 130, for example. This would mean now your return will be 33%. Again, do you guys get that? So higher the return, and return is a function of productivity. The better the productivity, the higher the rate of return, right? So if capital goods become more productive, guys, I want to go back to the thing. Number 3 is basically, number 2 was if it's cheaper. Number 3 is what if the productivity of capital goes up? If productivity of capital also goes up, then our theory suggests this, that higher will be the rate of return, right? Higher will be the rate of return, and therefore you will see firms will invest more at all levels of interest rates. Again, we have the same effect, but this time the reason is different. First reason was basically it was cheaper to invest. Second reason is basically it's just productive to invest. So, for example, let's say when you buy a new car, it might be more expensive, but what if its mileage is better? What if its return is better? What if, like that kind of a thing? So your productivity is going up, right? Productivity is basically a factor of technology improvement. Like how can productivity go up? Basically, better technology. Improvement in technology could make the productivity technology to do that, right? The fourth factor, guys, is basically an exogenous factor or independent factor like business confidence. What happened when business confidence go up? Firms will invest more. Why would firms invest more? Because they're optimistic about the future return. So firms will invest more, and that would make the demand for investment to rise. Okay, so first factor was a shift, was a movement, but all the other three factors are the shift of the demand for investment, and the diagram may look like the same. The demand curve will shift to the right at all level of interest rates. Make sense, guys? This is a really popular exam question. So you need to like prepare this another difficult question. So the question is simply, what are the factors that affect investment, and how does a rise in investment affect GDP? Okay, so what are the factors that affect investment? Would be your interest rates, your productivity, your business confidence, your sort of technology, and like cost of capital goods. And then you talk about a rise in investment will make like this is what I'm going to say. A rise in investment will result in GDP to rise via the, what's the keyword that should I, via the what? Via means through the kind of closer, you close through the multiplier, guys, through the multiplier, remember? And we can show this diagram. And I want you guys to draw this diagram with me, because that's exactly what you need to write. That when your investment go up, we draw this kind of a diagram. Y equals to AE, Y equals to AE, and when your investment go up, your GDP goes up. So if this was my AE naught, can I have 1 minute of attention? When I goes up, we know this, that your AE goes to AE1 and GDP will go up from Y0 to Y1, and this change in Y is equal to change in AE times multiplier. So guys, if you're, and we know this multiplier is a function of MPC and MPS, it's a formula, and that's why when you were saying, forgot your name, what's your name, sorry? Ashfaq. When Ashfaq was saying, I don't know why Ashfaq, I was thinking of you as Ashraf. I was like, Ashraf to me, Ashfaq. Ashfaq, that's why MPC is kind of like a close answer, because the larger the MPS, the smaller the MPC, and therefore the larger the MPC, the smaller the MPS, and the larger the MPC, the larger the multiplier. So in a way, you were right. So if your multiplier is 5, right, times AE is 100, then change in Y would be equal to, for example, 500. So there will be a more than proportionate change in GDP, which is good news for us, because like if government can reduce interest rates, they can encourage investment, which can encourage GDP to grow. So higher investment, if I know the tools to make, so interest rate is a very powerful. Remember monetary policy? Yes. So we will come back to monetary policy, because ultimately, if your goal is to make the economic growth to happen, a tool could be investment, which is dependent on interest rate. So lower interest rate, increase investment, increase GDP through the multiplier. It will be having a larger effect also. And multiplier depends on basically your MPC and MPS. If you're a poor country, your MPC will be large, which means you can achieve higher economic growth when your interest rates are low. Which makes us understand why is Pakistan keeping interest rates so high. During COVID, by the way, Pakistan reduced interest rates, because like everyone was giving them really hard time. So one of the good things that they did was that they reduced interest rates, something closer to that, but there was a time it was really high. It was like roughly on the 18-19% overall people were having. Now the roughly rate is around about 9 to 11%, closer to that. But when you look at Japan, when you look at developed countries, the interest rates are roughly 2%, 1%, something on those lines. We'll talk about that, because in Pakistan the bigger problem is also inflation. and we know this, that AD going to the right would mean demand pull inflation. So there's also that problem that also happens. So Pakistan is dealing with a lot of stuff, and that's why it's not really easy to lower the interest rate and make the economy really jump up when it comes to that, because you then have a possibility of inflation happening as well. Okay, guys, I'm done for today. Thank you very much. We are done pretty quickly. So I'm going to talk about this just to let you know. We're going to talk about next time. We're going to talk about a concept called paradox of thrift, and also another theory of investment. Okay, so we'll talk about that later.